Welcome to the Smoke Trail.
I love it. Thank you for being here.
This is a lot of fun, and I'm super excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
And I'm excited to be here. We're at 33 Gough, which I know we'll talk a little bit about, but this is our first Dignity Move site in San Francisco.
It was the very first one anywhere.
Anywhere. So
yes.
This was actually the first one that got put up.
Yes.
And remind me, it was like 4 months.
We started, the construction started in January, right after the holidays, and we moved the first people in early March.
Yeah, it's a cool site. And now we're at least 2 years in.
Yep.
Yeah. And I understand the big problem is the people like it so much they don't want to leave.
Right. So this parking lot, there are actually two parking lots on both sides of an old City College building that was condemned for earthquake. And a developer has control of it and is planning to build mixed use, but nobody's building anything right now, especially with homelessness, quite frankly. So it's been on hold. We had an 18-month lease originally, and then it got extended another 2 years, and now it's being extended another 2. So we may be here a while.
Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful example of some of the work that you've done and we've done as a group, but you've led our way, and we're going to get into that a little bit. But what I like to do at the beginning of the Smoke Trail is, since it's my trail, this is a dialogue. It's not an interview, it's a conversation with us. And my intention is to share some wisdom, share some thoughts that we have on our journey in life, that it might be helpful to others who are on a path. Maybe they aspire to give back, maybe they aspire to help society, or they have something that they really think about as a cause, but they really haven't figured out how to take action. I think nobody illustrates the service for selfless service to community better than you, Elizabeth.
Well, thank you.
And so I thought it would be really fun to have a conversation. We get into lots of things like spirituality and kind of what is it drives us, what is it makes us tick and so I'm going to ask you some questions that maybe don't normally get asked, because you always get asked about the projects, but not necessarily about what makes you tick.
Yep. Great. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Let's see where we go.
Awesome. Well, one of the things that is so cool about Dignity Moves is that it really came out of it really came naturally. It wasn't a contrived thing. In fact, it was something that I joke about this, but it is true that I got invited to an original meeting that you were leading, and it was it was going to be in person, and then COVID happened, so we did it on Zoom, and I thought it was a bunch of CEOs who were getting together to kind of complain about the homeless problem, and
pretty much how it started.
And basically just say woe is me, and I was like, okay, I can do that. And little did I know that it would turn into a very fast-moving, active group that is solving for it and not complaining about it, actually just head down doing things.
It was never intended. We did not intend to start a nonprofit. It was a group of members from Young Presidents Organization who came together out of curiosity, knowing nothing about homelessness, but we knew one thing: whatever we're doing is not working. And there was some arrogance to that, which is YPOers saying, well, we're smarter than the rest of the people. But when we took a big step back and looked at it, quite frankly, with the cold analysis that business leaders do, it really was obvious. And we are doing it wrong. And I think that fresh look actually is what allowed this to be. Yeah. And a bunch of people, when we first got started, we weren't intending to start anything. Nope. And the ideas that people had, one guy was totally convinced we needed to buy all the cruise ships.
Well, I said that.
Was that you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I talked to my friend Mark Tamus, who worked for one of the big cruise lines. I'm like, could this work? They're not in use.
Right.
And he said you do not, the cost to run them,
yes,
it would make it prohibitive. It wouldn't make sense. I'm like, okay, it seemed like a good idea.
One guy wanted to take over some government property and just set up whatever we were going to set up, cabins, and not ask for permission, then call the media and make people dare us to leave, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's one strategy. And then one guy in the group said, well, I make these backyard do-it-yourself ADU kits. I could design something for you. And one other guy, knows the mayor and made a phone call, and somebody else knows how to do press releases. We just all leaned in and did what we could do. And we were thinking we would do one project because it was kind of a cool idea. And then, wow, it exploded.
Yeah.
And so we created a nonprofit, and the rest is history.
You know, one of the things that always struck me, and correct me if I get the stats wrong, but the waiting list here in San Francisco was like 13 years to get for these are unsheltered homeless to get into one of the shelter options.
To get into the permanent housing.
And they were building units for $800,000 to $1.3 million, depending on the project, and they're taking forever.
Yep.
And one of the things that made so much sense to us, to all of us, and you articulated so well, was like the streets can't be our waiting room.
Right.
The more weeks you are on the street unsheltered, the less likely you are to be able to get back into some kind of functional form where you can re-enter society.
That was there were kind of a couple aha moments that just finally it's like, oh man, I'm going to have to do this. And one of them was learning that when people first become homeless, less than 20% are mentally ill and have such a substance abuse problem that they would be unable to take care of themselves. Stability. It's about 17%. That right there was shocking, right? Because the people on the streets today, pretty much all of them are mentally ill and use substances. And so the trauma that happens from when they become homeless and become on the streets, 4 weeks later, that 17% has doubled.
Yeah.
And if your only option is to wait on a waiting list for 14 years, of course everybody's mentally ill.
Yeah.
The trauma of that. I know how I feel when I haven't slept more than an hour a night.
Yeah.
Folks don't usually sleep more than an hour in a row. Right there, I'd be losing my mind.
I know how I feel just on a campsite with a nice plush sleeping bag and tent, and after a few days, let alone being out. So that was one of the things that struck us all. And what you really, I think you did. We made like 300 phone calls. You made 297 of them, and the rest of us made a few. But it was all about like who's doing this, who is actually helping them get off the street quickly and getting into some safe place where you can lock your stuff and sleep safely so that you can have a chance to get on your feet. And the answer was,
it's not happening.
It really wasn't happening.
That was probably the biggest thing that forced me to do it. When I learned that people first become homeless, there's still a big chance for them, right? And then that the system is fundamentally opposed to wasting money on anything that isn't a permanent solution. Mm-hmm. So shelters, by definition, are the least expensive they could possibly get away with.
Yeah.
They put all of the money toward permanent housing because anything interim is considered a waste of resources. That's for one very, very basic reason, which is that cities score themselves on reducing homelessness. And when somebody comes in from the streets into something temporary, they're still homeless. They're just classified as sheltered homeless.
Right.
So right there, a city would rather get one person into $1 million apartment than 50 people into something temporary.
And that right there, that is a arbitrary human imposed lens based on the bureaucracy and the system.
Yep.
That was choosing help one person in a certain way because they get credit for it versus help 50 people in a different way because they wouldn't get credit for it.
And I'm sure back when we started talking about this stuff, that was probably a reasonable metric because you were either homeless or not homeless.
Yeah.
But this middle ground of people being on the streets, that's come about because our costs are so high to build, and yet we still score ourselves on reducing homelessness. And that was such an aha moment to me that we started thinking about, okay, well, what do you mean it's squandered resources to spend money on something temporary? So the second aha moment was looking at what it costs to let people be on the streets.
Yeah.
I had no idea, right? I mean, it's expensive to clear encampments and whatever, but it's something like $80,000 per person per year that's on the streets. And if it costs $40,000 per person per year to give them 3 meals a day and case management and healthcare and all that stuff, it's such an obvious choice, except that $80,000 is scattered across so many budgets that you don't see it.
It's the police department, it's the health system,
the
hospitals, it's all of those things, and that might even be quite low because it doesn't count. What does it do to the people that live in the neighborhood, and how does it impact them? Conventions
and lost tourism and all that economic stuff. That's just hard costs, right? Yeah. But it's classic economics externalities, which is that all the entities that would benefit from ending it are not tasked with that. The one entity that is tasked with it, the housing department, is scored on reducing homelessness. Right there, And that is so solvable. That's just misaligned interests.
Yeah. That's just, it's, they say the problems that we have won't be solved by the level of thinking that created them. The level of thinking, the level of consciousness that creates this dichotomy of metrics and solving for a solution is just, it's in it, and they can't see, they have blinders on. And so what we did is basically took a lens at a little bit higher level and said, wait a minute, let's just be practical here.
Right.
And let's just do it.
Right.
And that didn't make everyone happy.
The powers that be, in fact, I stood right here.
Powers that were, we like to say.
The powers that were. The head of the homelessness coalition in San Francisco toured around here, and she said, I'm going to be clear with you. Your success is my worst nightmare. And I will do everything I can to make sure you don't succeed at this. The woman who runs the San Francisco Coalition for Homelessness, I toured her around here. And she said to me very clearly, she said, your success is my worst nightmare.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you don't succeed at this. If you have your little effing utopia and you get everybody in off the streets, the city will think they're done and they won't build the permanent housing that we need.
Right.
And I said, what's the difference, right? Like permanent housing in San Francisco, the single room occupancies are about the same size, right? I said, granite countertops don't solve homelessness. She looked at me and she said, yes, they do.
Yeah.
That thinking that this is squandered resources. So, again, with a little bit of YPO arrogance, we thought, well, you know what? We're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And we raised the money for this project fully philanthropically because we have our networks. We got $1 million from Tipping Point, which is the organization that now Mayor Lurie, he used to run that, about $500,000 from the hospital, because hospitals are the ones who bear the brunt of the unsheltered problem.
Yeah.
About half of the cost is medical. And $2.2 million, we've got 70 cabins, 90 people, 9 dogs, right? All housed with $2.2 million, which, and the demonstration effect of it was exactly what we wanted.
Yeah.
Because, the woman that was opposed to it in the city said any money we spend on things not permanent is a waste of resources. I said, well, lucky you, it's going to be free. And she said, anytime my staff spends talking to you, it's a waste of resources. But when we got down to it, she said, my nightmare is you're going to walk everyone through it, and they're going to love it, and they're going to make me do more of these.
Yeah.
And busted, right? That's exactly my goal. And her nightmare came through.
And in, I also have compassion for that woman.
Yes.
I don't know her, but her intentions may well have been good.
Absolutely.
But she just stuck in this blinded system where, she's just trying to maximize the incentives that are in front of her.
It's worse than that, because when you run a department, your department has a budget and a specific goal. Her budget is not even big enough to do what her goal is, which is to get people into permanent housing, right? So she's not a bad person, but in her lens, it would be a waste of resources.
Yeah.
And worse than that, because her budget also has to then care for the people, right?
Yeah.
Every meal could have gone towards a permanent roof.
Yeah. Well, okay. So fast forward. That was some of the initial thinking and the energy. You can hear it right here with your voice, and we're sitting in this cool place. Fast forward. The prior mayor, who was not helpful in the process, but then she started doing press conferences here.
I know,
a bunch of them, right? And we're like, we don't actually care who gets credit. It doesn't matter. Like what we want
it to be contagious, which is what
solution.
happened.
So now there was a new election. Mayor Lurie won the election. I got to meet him last year at a YPO event. He came and I told you, I think I texted you right after. I'm like, hey, I just met, this candidate, and he's on board. You're like, yeah, I know him really well. Okay, so he comes in, and we played a hand in kind of helping think about the problem, right? Yeah. So I know you were there.
Right here.
Yeah. Right
here, we did a press conference when he announced his homelessness plan.
Yeah.
And I will be honest, I asked for forgiveness, not permission, because Mayor Breed would not have been very happy to know that her competitor was hosting a press conference here, but I felt like he deserved it. His organization funded it. And he stood right here, and yes, I helped write that plan. Yeah. And one of the things is it said, I'm going to score my department not on the number of people who are out of homelessness, but on the number of nights spent sleeping on the streets per year. Yeah. That's the metric we're going to measure.
Yeah.
I mean, you know whose words those were, right? But he announced it right here. But the thing is, it wasn't just that he was all of a sudden being brave. The system started to see the benefit of this. And probably the most important is nobody turned it down.
Yeah.
The outreach workers said they used to go out to an encampment and they were lucky if they could get 1 out of 10 people to take a bunk bed in a warehouse. These people follow them, begging, right? Hundreds of people on the wait list. And right there, all of a sudden, when a mayor is getting a lot of trouble for get these people out of here, all of a sudden this becomes pretty attractive.
Yeah, for sure. Now, we had some success pretty early on in Santa Barbara. And that story is worth telling because I think that leads us to what is now going on in San Jose, what potentially can happen here in San Francisco. And that was, we did a small village right there next to the town hall, next to Morgan Stanley. I think. And I remember those guys were like, "We want to do what in this parking lot next to us?" And I think you walked out, and said, see that person over there? There's a homeless person across the street, someone on the steps, someone across this, and you're like, they're here already. We're going to give them a place to stay. And they're like, okay, begrudgingly, they're kind of like, all right, if you do what you say, we're not going to oppose it. So we did it. And we had the city, the community, the county, the businesses, everyone said, you know what, this is good. This is what we need to do.
Yep.
And the whole community got together and said, what do we need to do to provide enough housing so that we have no unsheltered homeless. Like we can actually give everyone an opportunity to get off the street and get to the next level. And I can't remember what the numbers were. You can fill in the blanks, but that's happening. That's all. That's live. That the whole county. And now it's a microcosm. It's a smaller place. But it galvanized the community.
So when I think about why I'm so inspired by this work, I've done a lot of soul searching about that, and it's less about homelessness necessarily, but for me it's about something that is bite-sized enough and I can see where you can actually solve it, right? Almost like a jigsaw puzzle. There is an answer and you have accomplished something. And not that global warming and all those things that are big and massive aren't important, but for me, unsheltered homelessness is solvable, like eradicated. And that all of a sudden gets me really way more excited than building a 35-bed room. And when Santa Barbara started talking that way, we said, let's do enough for the whole county so that no one needs to resort to and no one will be allowed to sleep on the streets. And all the supervisors went in behind a closed door session so nobody gets in trouble, and they all came out agreeing to do one in their district. And it's only 400 beds is what the gap was, but it will be ended in Santa Barbara County. And in fact, we're more than halfway there. And North County is going to be at what we call functional zero in the next few months. I mean, that's when all of a sudden you drive around the streets and you say, we accomplished it. It is done.
And I think the total cost to go functional zero for the county is something like $15 million.
Yes.
Is that all right?
That's when it's just like people's jaws drop, because I think the biggest thing standing in our way solving this problem is people don't think it's possible. And when you take
billions have been thrown at this.
And you don't see.
And you're like, well, it just seems to get worse. So that's one of the biggest objections that we have when we talk to potential donors, private families, companies, corporations, foundations. They're like, well, what did the tens of billions of dollars that California has spent on this go to? And our answer is that just because money was misallocated and spent on things that were not effective doesn't mean this isn't. And what we have done is demonstrate, basically, what you have done, demonstrate that with very little resources, it can be solved, because it's a different way of thinking.
It's a different way. So the data is that California has spent $24 billion on homelessness, and during that same period, homelessness went up by about 30%. So no, it's not working, right? But if you look at, say, San Francisco, and you take the number of beds you would need to reach what we call functional zero unsheltered, the system has it up, $250 million. Our annual homelessness budget is $380. Right? For less than 1 year's budget, you'd have everyone indoors. Now, to be clear, they're still homeless, right? We don't claim that this has solved homelessness. But if you don't have anybody on the streets, first of all the savings that happens, right? But psychologically, it takes the pressure off the system. And we do need to build permanent housing, but the streets aren't the waiting room, and people aren't getting desperately ill. And the first thing you got to do is get everyone indoors, and $250 million?
Well, I think about, again, back to when you don't only get an hour of sleep, or you're camping and how it feels, and you're constant fight or flight mode, right? You're just trying to save yourself, protect yourself. Just getting people sheltered for some period of time, their health improves, their mental situation changes so that where they could actually receive some help, right? And it again, like you said, it's a step. You have to get them stabilized so that they can receive the help that would get them to the next level. And you and I are like, we have a wide-ranging group of people that have supported Dignity Moves, and a wide-ranging people that we work with. And I'm definitely in the category of free market, self-determinism, sovereign individuals. Everyone can make a choice in their life, and also everyone deserves an opportunity to make a different choice, to make a choice to do something different with their life, to get themselves out of the situation, whatever the reason they got there. Everyone deserves second chances, but we as a society that is very successful, very wealthy, we have everything. There's no reason we can't help these people get that chance. It doesn't mean everyone's going to make a good choice,
right?
But it is our obligation to give them that chance.
I spent a lot of my career before I started Dignity Moves waiting for the music to go by.
It's all good.
I spent a lot of my career in the microfinance industry, which is small loans to the world's poorest so they can build their own way out of poverty. And I really believe that, some poor woman in Africa, it would have taken her decades to save the $400 she needs for a sewing machine, right? $400 loan changes her life. And so yes, we're helping, right? But we're helping them help themselves, right? And that's the similar thing here, which is that I don't believe philosophically that we should or owe people to take care of them the rest of their lives. Now, society does owe people, that's why we come together as a society, those who really can't care for themselves. But this is about setting every expectation that those people can get back on their feet, right? But you can't do it from the streets. We walk by and we think, why isn't that person getting a job? Like, you got to stop and think about it. They can't shower, they can't plug in a phone, they don't have a printer for a resume. We got to be kidding. It's just giving them the basics. And I really fundamentally believe that the privacy is way more than we realize. And, my dad said I should name this organization A Deep Breath, because that's what it is, right? It's a place to come in and take a deep breath, right? And then get out of panic mode. And it takes a little while. If you've been sleeping on the streets for a while, you probably need several weeks here before you're very interested in talking about.
I think about spiritual path and what it means at different levels of consciousness. And in the lower levels, you're stuck in shame, in anger, in all kinds of negative emotions. In those lower levels, you're in a basically fight or flight mode. You're in an animalistic, mechanical mode, and you're not. There's no free will, actually.
Right.
You're just reacting. You're just reacting. And it's only when you get past, under Hawkins scale 200, and you get above that, and you're like, oh, there's other things here, and you get into the more of the positive emotions, and you work your way up to love and unconditional love, but you can't get there if you're stuck in that mechanical mode. And there's tons of people in society who are stuck in those negative, like vast numbers of our society are in that negative mode, and they're not homeless.
Right.
But they're still stuck there. And so, when I think about the example of like the 12-step groups, which now that I've done a lot of work on it, I've talked to people in it, and I realize, and I'm now 2 years not drinking anymore. I didn't join a 12-step group, but the reason they work is because the field, the power of the group is at such a high, calibrates at such a high level of consciousness. So it's at this 540 unconditional love, and as long as the person asks for help and stays committed to the group, they're under the influence of that field, and it can get them out of those lower levels of emotion. And I look at Dignity Move as that, like we are creating a field that's at a higher level from where they were on the streets for sure. Whether it, and I think the intention of Dignity Moves and what we do at these villages is at a very high level. If it's 540 or it can be calibrated, but it's at a very high level. And so that's one reason people don't want to leave. is that like there's love here.
It's a great energy.
There is love here, and that love is like it's inspiring to the people. It's like it makes them like I want to be better.
You're onto something, and we're so used to treating people like cardboard when we walk by. We tell ourselves, right, and that. You often hear you should just look in their eyes, right? And that feels weird when you're on the streets. But I was asking the staff, I said, what
people don't like to look at each other's eyes,
right?
Generally.
I asked the staff, I said, what could the kids do? They're high schoolers who all want to come help. And she said, facials. Because the act of touching them, you could just rub oil on their face, looking in their eyes and showing that you care. She said, you have no idea how life-changing that is. I mean, it just makes me teary. I mean, it's like,
that's amazing.
And for kids to like, she's so right. And one of the most beautiful things I think about this whole effort, every Sunday, high schoolers come and make pancake breakfast. Showing that you actually care. I mean, it sounds so trite, but they've got none of that message, that energy.
Well, it's because inside everyone has this divine soul, and the level of consciousness is simply our separation from it. That's all it is. So when we're in these lower levels of energy, it's because we don't recognize our own inner divinity. And when someone does nice things and giving facials, doing pancake breakfast, building a village, really showing that there's care here, it speaks to their higher self, and it's like, oh, there is something there. And it's pretty magical.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, somebody who's been on the streets for a while, they have deeply internalized the message that they're worthless, right? That they can't accomplish anything. They've been told that, probably had parents tell them that, right? And then it's played out in reality, right? And
well, it's inside their subconscious, and it's manifesting itself, it's reinforcing itself, and they're the hardest on themselves.
Yes.
Because it's been ingrained inside that subconscious, so where it's like, oh, you're worthless, you're worthless, you're worthless. You say that to yourself. We all have this inner voice, right? And we're probably our toughest critics usually, right? And the work we do to cleanse that and find your inner love of yourself is what elevates all of humanity. And so these people are not only, it's not just that their parents told them, it's that they're telling themselves that over and over and over again, and you got to break that cycle.
Another special story, there was some kids who came and did a barbecue, right? And one of those residents was had hubcaps, and she was painting these beautiful paintings on the hubcaps. And one of the students was like, wow, I love that. Where can I buy one? And she's like, really? You would buy it? Why would anybody buy it? And that girl sat there and set her up on Etsy on an account so that she could sell them and write a little story, say, I'm homeless, this is my heart, and really be vulnerable on Etsy. And people could go in and buy them. And this woman was so stunned anybody would want something that she'd created. But like, she just hadn't given herself permission to believe that.
It's, I mean, we see it in privileged society, in society of wealthy, successful people, and within that society you've got negative self-talk. So it happens at all levels, but at this level, it's just giving everyone a boost. It's like, hey, a positive boost to get off your feet. Well, all right. So I want to talk a little bit about the micro lending, just because like that predated all this. That was like, you've done that because you've been doing social enterprise or some kind of give back thing for now a couple decades. And I think when we originally met, you were running the social networks at YPO, and I know you were really active there. I was running the Beer, Wine, and Spirits Network, social as well, but different kind of social. But just give me a little, like, what got you to that? Like, what, I know you had a very successful tech career, and you were at Yahoo and Microsoft, and doing well, and then you pivoted. What drove that?
And I've thought a lot about that too. And so microfinance, again, I mean, it's a little bit of, well, I'll tell the story and you'll figure it out, which is that, I got smitten with the idea because I liked the idea of helping people help themselves, and coming from Silicon Valley, the power of entrepreneur. I mean, that energy, entrepreneurial energy, you could sell it for $1 million a drop if you could bottle that, right? And
totally.
So very powerful to harness that. And so I became, committed to the idea, and I intended to be a donor, get back to my, the real world. And And then I was introduced to Muhammad Yunus, who's won the Nobel Peace Prize for homelessness, for microfinance work. And he invited me to potentially join his board. So I attended a board meeting as an observer. And I'm looking at his documents. And I'm like, wait a minute, you guys are profitable. Why are you a nonprofit? Right? I might be able to get you a $100 donation, but I could get you $100,000 if you were going to return the money to someone. And it's also a little hypocritical that you're expecting people to repay in full. And so I blurted it out of the board meeting, and he looked at me and said, it's unethical to make money when doing good. And then Steve Rockefeller put me aside the brake. He goes, don't worry about the ethics, it's just not possible. And I left there determined to do it just because I wanted to prove him wrong.
Yeah.
Like, there was something about like the challenge.
Yeah.
And so I raised $7 million from friends and family. I mean, not a big amount for, investment fund. We had debt, not equity, so there wouldn't be perverse incentives to charge the highest interest rate possible. And we helped so many people, but again, it was an arrogance thing in a way, which is I proved that you could do this with, at scale in a more logical way, because the bigger organizations get their economies of scale that are dramatic, and you could afford to charge lower interest rates.
Yeah.
And I just knew I was right, and I wanted to demonstrate. So that project, I had Deutsche Bank and HSBC and Citibank all on my investment committee to watch and learn. And sure enough, Deutsche Bank raised an $85 million fund, and I was on the board of that. And now today, the vast majority of money in microfinance is for profit. And so there's a sense of just accomplishment of going against the grain and against the current thinking and saying, wait a minute, logic tells me that the current grain isn't right. And that's kind of where this has come from. Yeah,
and that for-profit mechanism, it was a mechanism to attract lots more microfinance. The idea was, we can raise X amount of money from donations or from governments or whatever, and there's only so much that you're going to get that way.
Right.
But if you can create it's a ongoing. It becomes a like a water wheel, where it's replenishing. Right?
So I kind of think of it like the way I dealt with the Muhammad Yunus accusations and about people getting wealthy off of the poor and all that stuff. So I feel like if you want to solve one of the world's biggest problems, you take the sharpest tool possible. And if the sharpest tool is a for-profit investment model, and as a byproduct, investors make a return, then that's great. It's just when you're trying to maximize return by doing something good, right, which is greenwashing. And so when I spent a lot of time, 18 years, I ran impact investment funds. And there's a full spectrum from for-profit goals that you pretend are impact so that it looks good, and there's non-profit that begrudgingly has a revenue model because they know they need it to stay afloat. And there's everything in between, and quite frankly, all of those are valid. What's not valid is not being in agreement from day one. So when I've got my hot chili pepper company, if we're trying to help poverty alleviation, we want to pay the farmers the most we can. If we're trying to maximize profit, we want to pay them as little as possible. We're not going to debate that in the boardroom. We're going to have decided that in advance, and in that example, our goal was to be able to grow the company enough that we could help more farmers, not maximize return, but also not be at a loss.
It's a balanced view.
But either is fine. I mean, some of the environmental tech stuff, hugely profitable. And it's venture capital type returns, but that you can do even if you are just seeking wealth.
Well, not to jump into a hot topic today, but you drove up in your Tesla and seemed to be scratch-free. There's a great example where the mission of so much of a lot of society would like to go to green solutions and to climate-friendly things. That's the most successful company in the world doing that. Great, and with great products. And very valuable and very profitable, and it's the best chance we have of shifting to a green environment. And so there you got an example.
When solutions that solve problems are highly profitable, then the problems get solved. Let's just be blunt, right? I mean, greed is very, very powerful in its system, right? And so if you can set it up so that people can get very wealthy, ending poverty will be ended.
Well, and I think one of the cool things that we're playing around with Dignity Moves is a private public fund scenario that is designed to allow people to take advantage of the tax write-offs for units, which are, basically, if you've got passive income, there's a way to use that as a, to defray that. So every dollar you invest in those funds is basically at 50%. It's a tax shield, so it's only 50% actual cost to you. And there's a model that's emerging, so it'll be interesting to see how that comes out and whether that is able to attract the large pools of capital that we think are necessary for this to build out the stock of homes basically that need to be built.
The thing about people being judgmental of greed, right, is still very, very real. It's very hypocritical. But even right now, when we're putting out a piece of state legislation that we're co-sponsoring, the consultant, 2 years ago, I talked about how, since this is technically housing, there could be a scenario where people could pay rent, right, and be able to stay longer. And that rubbed her so wrong that to this day, she's convinced that I personally am trying to get rich by using, inferior building codes and charge poor people a lot of money and get rich. She's absolutely said that is her story about me.
It's a psychological term known as projection. So the worst thing that is inside that you project on other people. It's just still.
And then the permanent housing that everybody's so committed to, that's backed by tax credits from Wall Street. And you know how lucrative those are?
Yeah.
But somehow doing this in a way that would be profitable, or maybe even just have some income like rent, is somehow heresy and evil.
Yeah.
And
you're helping dispel that, and I think rational minds, again, this is not about judgment, and we're not judging the people that we're trying to get off the street, and we're not judging even the system and the people that have maybe squandered billions of dollars in the ecosystem. It's about how do we solve for the greatest good, and that's going to include profit, not for profit.
If we can tap into financial models, we will be able to solve this problem a lot faster.
Yeah,
flat out.
Yeah. All right, so you're talking to a 22-year-old version of Elizabeth, and she's wants to save the world, gung-ho. She's on the fence. She's watching this video, and she's like, how do I do this? What do I do? What do I do? What do you tell yourself?
So first of all, my 23-year-old self did not have any interest in saving the world.
Okay.
I was at Microsoft, and then of course later at Yahoo, and loved coming up with new stuff that was really because it was new.
Yeah.
And in Microsoft, I came on right when Windows came out and the first Word for Windows.
You're the one to blame for that?
I am. And it used to be a black screen with white text was a word processor.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's colorful and you can see bold and all that kind of stuff, right? And I got to be involved in making what those features would be. And the lawyers, particularly, I was selling to the lawyers, right? How do I know it's bold? It doesn't have a bold on and then bold off code around the word, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, because it looks bold,
it is
right?
bold.
We had to have a feature called reveal codes that would turn on a bold on around the word and bold off because people weren't ready to think about what was a pretty obvious improved system, right? And that's the kind of thing that gets me really excited, which is, we've sent men to the moon and decoded the human genome. Don't tell me we can't get 4 walls and a roof around people, right? I mean,
totally.
We're just not thinking about it, right?
Totally. So you weren't thinking about saving the world. You were just thinking about doing things better and doing cool things, which I can relate to. So it doesn't, as a 22-year-old, you don't need to try to save the world. Go be you. Go accomplish something. Go just do whatever you do fully, right?
Yes.
And that will open up avenues for doing all kinds of great things. Now, if you can also, while you're at it, do things that keep you engaged in helping others, do it. Volunteer on Sundays for the pancake breakfast. Do something to where you are connected to other humans and helping them back while you're pursuing your goals. And then at some point, you're going to have an opportunity, like you had the opportunity, to kind of pivot your whole career and say, you know what, I'm going to dedicate my life to doing these things.
And the reason, again, it goes back to my advice would be find one thing that is so finite that you can actually accomplish it, right? And to be truthful, I care about homelessness. It could have been puppies. I mean, right? It was a problem that I saw. Wow. When you turn a few dials, we can solve it with a capital S, solve it.
Yeah.
And this is just unsheltered homelessness. It's just one piece of a much bigger problem. But that's what drives me, is because I know we're going to freaking end this problem.
Yeah. Well, and it's like any big task. It's about pick something that you can actually fix and accomplish.
Yes.
Do that. Then look up what's the next thing that you can do.
Yep.
And so it doesn't mean don't think of a big audacious goal that's
right.
going to be really whatever. Bring man to the moon or the Mars or whatever it is. But there's things you can do in the interim that you have to have success at. And so it's picking something and then putting all the energy and focus on accomplishing that.
And you also pick, if you look at something that needs to be accomplished, and you pick your little issue. What is also more attractive to me is that solving this one is actually really easy. And when I say that, it's because there's not opposition. Both sides of the aisle, right? If you're humane, you care about the humane and the suffering, then you want everyone in off of the streets.
Yeah.
And if you care about fiscal responsibility and reducing welfare, you want that.
Yeah.
If you're the general public and you just think as a taxpayer you deserve to have clean sidewalks and streets, all of those points of view converge.
If you're religious and you think it's wrong to have people living in squalor, all those things, there's no natural opposition that should be there.
The only thing not in that intersection is current policy and funding.
Yeah.
Those can be solved with the stroke of a pen.
Yeah.
It's that easy.
Yeah.
Which is why I spend a lot of time with a very loud voice raising awareness of that and shining a light on it, because it can be solved.
Yeah. And I think this 33 Gough is a great illustration, which is we just built one in the heart of homelessness, in the heart of the city that's not working. We just did one.
Yep.
And then it became this thing that everyone started looking at and said, oh, it can be done. And that's the same thing. Like everything builds on success, and people generally, unfortunately, don't have they have at one point when they're children, but a lot of people lose their ability to imagine what's possible.
Right.
And so it does take someone to just break through that, all the naysayers, and just imagine it and do it, and then show it. Like, look, we just did this.
Yeah. And one of the other things that keeps me going, there's a guy here that came up to me the other day, and he heard that I was with Digging Boom, so he was kind of scampering around behind me a little bit, and finally he said, could I just talk to you for a minute? He said, I just want you to know you saved my life.
Yeah.
And he had tears in his eyes, and you know what? I started crying. I said, you know what? We did.
Yeah.
We did. And it's real hard to not keep doing something when you feel that good about it.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's really driving me, to be honest, is I love the public awareness and the that this is getting, and both Mayor Mahan and Mayor Lurie are both now literally embracing our concept of what we call functional zero unsheltered, which means end it in your entire city all at once.
Yeah.
And this is the first time there's something fresh and optimistic on a very depressing topic of homelessness.
Yeah.
And so we're getting a ton of attention and a ton of media. Actually, you're the one who introduced us to our PR team. It was just totally excited about. And that's inspiring too, because when people learn that this is really possible, I mean, I can't tell you how many people say this is the most optimistic thing I've heard in years.
Yeah. Well, and I think we've got obviously a lot of change happening in Washington, and that message is going to get there. It is getting there, and there's a real opportunity to rethink. Through HUD and through all these different programs, rethink how we're delivering services. You and I weren't in business or in this issue when they decided to blow up all the mental health centers, and all the hospitals that were out there. And I'm sure there were the occasional one for the cuckoo's nest example of going off the rails, but they didn't come up with a different solution. And so we've got there's got to be a holistic view of this thing. This is one part of it. So
I get in trouble when I say this, but I actually think that when Trump is out there slashing entire departments and entire budgets and so forth, I think when they talk about how homelessness has been a waste of money, with all due respect, I agree, right? Our current system has been squandering money. And this, when all those housing vouchers go away, it may force the issue that we're going to have to get over our perfectionist, everybody, idealism, everybody gets their own granite countertop.
Yeah.
It may force us to finally get to something pragmatic, which is that we're going to have some place that is decent, to be fair. This meets building codes set by the state. It is not a slum. It is not, but it's about the size of a dorm room in college. And by the way, my son's tuition bill says housing on it.
Yeah.
It's room just about this size.
Yeah.
Don't tell me it's not housing.
No, these are exactly.
Well, the system tells me it's not housing. It doesn't meet HUD's definition of housing. It meets my definition of housing.
Right. Yeah. All right. So, on a personal front,
I can get worked up about
no,
it.
but look, it's the energy that drives it, and that's why you have so many followers like me and people supporting what you're doing, is because this we believe, and we believe because this energy. You're right, and we're not right about every which way we turn, how we do this, how we do that. We've made mistakes. We've learned along the way. But what we're doing is like, if we have to change, we'll pivot.
It is the right answer.
Yeah.
Just get everyone indoors.
Yeah.
That
part is right.
Is the right
That's
answer.
unequivocal. And it's like, okay, however we have to do that, let's do it, and let's do it in an efficient way, in a speedy way, so that these people have a chance to make a different choice and
return to being contributing members of society.
They are sovereign beings, and they forgot.
And it's so tragic that we are losing as society. We are losing the contribution that they could be making, and obviously there's
more. It's even greater than that. It's not just what we're losing there. It's what do we lose as a society by ignoring it.
Our souls.
By not solving it. No, I mean, there's a real thing there.
There's a real thing there.
It doesn't go unnoticed.
I get in trouble saying this one for sure, but when we studied slavery and the Holocaust and the genocides, and you stop and think, how did the normal person get up in the morning and go, oh well, that's just the way it is, right?
Yeah.
And if you'd spoken up under Hitler, you would have gotten killed. So maybe you got a reason not to speak up. But we do not have that excuse. And honestly, I hope our grandkids look at us and say, people slept where?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean you just let that happen?
Yeah.
Right? And shame on us.
Yeah. No, this is a great example, and there's other examples in society, but the most important thing, so what I would tell my 22-year-old self, or your 22-year-old Elizabeth, is do exactly what you said. I totally agree. Pursue passionately whatever you want to do, and go for it. But realize that every human is a sovereign being, and that it is up to each of us to recognize that. But you start with yourself. Like, nobody can help anyone else if you don't recognize it in yourself.
Right.
And so that's one of the things I spend a lot of time on, is talking to people who have realized that, because the energy level of these higher consciousness it affects everyone. It's what Digging Moves is doing. It's lifting people up. It's what you're doing, and you don't talk about it like I'm talking about it, but you're doing it. So it's like you're an embodiment of it. It's not you don't have to intellectualize it. You just are doing it.
And you just think about what your superpowers are, and that's always kind of a tough question to think about. But what is really, when I'm in my zone, what do I feel like? And I have contagious optimism, and I'm well aware of it, and I consciously feel like that is my obligation to the world, is to be so passionately optimistic that this problem can be solved, that it is contagious. And I think if I contribute only that, then I've done something really important.
You have, and I can attest. And when you have that kind of energy and that kind of contagious optimism, you can take a bunch of arrows in the back, you can take a bunch of hits, and you do. And it's like, but you know what, at the end of the day, you're not there to please the naysayers. You're there to solve and to do things. And that is contagious.
It is contagious, and the good news is the tide's turning. Right? And this is going to be the wave of the future, and we are going to solve this problem. And I think demonstrating it, and then you could kind of sit back and watch, right? I mean, it will start rolling downhill.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting.
It is exciting.
I thank you for everything you do, and who you are, and it is it's inspiring to me. It's inspiring to everybody involved. It really is.
Well, that's part of it too, which is that this problem affects us all in our souls and in our pocketbooks, and this is an all hands on deck solution, right? anybody who can contribute. One YPOer says he makes tiles. He's like, can you use tiles? I'm like, I don't know. Sure. Right?
Yeah.
If we're all putting in what we can, and it doesn't mean money, right? It means thoughts and brilliance and ideas and energy, and then that's how it's going to get solved.
Yep. And then there's other societal issues that, you know, other people can
I was going to say, I'm taking on one.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, but like it takes a bunch of us,
Yes.
and you know, pick your spot.
Pick your
like
spot.
you said, it could have been homeless, it could have been something else, you know, but pick something, and just really like do it.
And something finite enough that you can actually accomplish it.
Yeah.
And really cross it off the list.
Right. And
Polio, we can eradicate chronic homelessness. You'll
Yes.
never fully eradicate homelessness, and especially unsheltered. I mean, homelessness overall, but
Right.
unsheltered. Like, it's like a bathtub, and there's water going in and the drain's flowing out. But as long as the drain is working well, right, chronic homelessness is defined as somebody suffering on the streets for over a year with debilitating conditions. That needs to be eradicated like polio.
Yeah.
And it can be.
Yeah.
It should never exist.
No, that is solvable, and we're doing it right now.
Yes.
And we're sitting in an example of it. So, I would love to have you back on a little down the road where
Love
we can
that.
talk more about this and kind of check in on where things are going. And you know, you and I talk all the time, but
Yeah.
I think it's fun to include this audience who, you know, if they're listening to the Smoke Trail, they're on some kind of spiritual path.
Yeah.
They are inspired in some way, and if they made it this long into it, we're reaching them.
Yes.
And that's pretty cool. And we're not trying to reach everybody. We want the
Yep.
motivated to hear it and to do whatever they want to do.
Well, and for me, this is what gets me into my spiritual glow,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because maybe for some of the wrong reasons, like, intellectual, or, it's good for the ego to be solving a big problem and all of that. But it's almost like a drug. I mean, I'm just addicted to it because I'm so optimistic, and
Yeah.
I know, and I can see it, that it fills my heart. It fills me, and it takes me to a level I've never been. So
Look, Gandhi took down the British Empire, the greatest empire of the world, right? It had all the power, but really that power was based on force. It calibrated at a negative consciousness.
Yep.
And Gandhi was in the 700s, which is a very enlightened level. So one little frail man, could hunger
Feed all the
fast and
armies.
could do these things and literally inspired the creation of a nation. And so whenever I think about can some one person make a difference? Of course. There's many examples of it.
yeah.
And and it's the field that you operate at is so much more powerful than all the negative fields below that it makes a difference. That's why we're solving that problem.
And we're doing it together, Smoke. Seriously, you've been such a cheerleader and such a stalwart with me, and your entrepreneurial energy that could take a company crashes, take another one, that resilience, I think, and determination we're very like-minded, and you've been a great partner.
Well, we did have a few moments when we had a few naysayers in our midst, saying, well, why don't we just do this one thing or this one thing, or why are we trying to do so much? Right? We did have a few
I got a lot of
like that, and
I
definitely was on the corner of the room that said, no, let's solve this. Let's go for it. You're right. You're not wrong about it.
It's important. Some of our senior team felt pretty committed to the fact that we are a real estate developer, and our job is to develop more projects, and that yes, we would make a lot of money, right, as a nonprofit or for-profit if we built a ton of real estate projects, but we're about starting a movement, right? And overseeing hammers and nails is the least of the value add. We are about getting this message out, and
along the way we agreed to let's create the best practices blueprint and give it away.
the playbook.
Let's make the playbook and give it away, and that's what we're doing. That's what we've done with the city here, with the new mayor. What we've done down in San Jose, right?
Well, depending on when this gets published, it's a sneak preview, which is it's getting launched. We have a full open source playbook that's going to be released in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and that's could we have turned it into something where we're licensing it or doing make it a big consulting business? Yeah, but you know what? That's what our point is. Let's solve.
Put it out to the universe and see, and help others do it.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, my
for
friend. I'm
having
so happy
me.
to have you.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, this is cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.